want to take a few minutes and I want to talk about when fear scares you. When fear scares you. In Psalm 34, in verse 4, there's a very famous verse. And that famous verse says this: I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all my fears. I really couldn't tell you over my journey with God how many times that verse has been the verse that really got me through something that I needed help in because my fears were scaring me. Has anyone else had their fears scare you before? People ask me, they say, do you like horror movies? I said, no, I deal with life. It's scary enough. I don't need anything else to scare me. Just doing life can be scary. But he says, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. See, fear can drive you crazy. Because what fear can do is it can cause you to think things you shouldn't think. And fear can cause you to do things you shouldn't do. So fear can cause you to think something you shouldn't think, and fear can cause you to do something you shouldn't do. And Psalm 34 epitomizes this. There's probably no passage that would epitomize it as much as this. And most people know that the Psalms were David journaling before God. So it was basically David as he would sit down after he had been through events, and he was trying to capture the emotions of the moment. And then as he captured those emotions of that moment, he would then turn around and he would put them down, and we would get to see. But many times we see the emotions, but we don't see the background. And what we know is the mess that we can get ourselves in is sometimes bigger than the mess that life can get us in. I need to say that slowly. Sometimes the mess we can get ourselves in, I mean, this is without the devil's help. This is do it yourself. Sometimes we can get ourselves in a mess that's worse than the mess life could get us into. And see, if you know the background of Psalm 34, David's afraid. And the reason he's afraid is he's running for his life. He's just absolutely in fear. God's appointed him to be the king of Israel. But as much as that was good news to David, it was bad news to the king of Israel. So the king of Israel really didn't like that. And so God had said to David, you're going to be king. But King Saul said, I'm going to do everything I can to stop it. And so he was always chasing David, trying to kill him. And so he was the most wanted man in all of Israel. And there were times when you read the Psalms and you read 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, David barely got out with his life. And this is one of those times, and if you really wanted the background, you'd go to 1 Samuel chapter 21 and verse 10, because in 1 Samuel 21:10, it's talking about this moment. And what it says, and David arose and fled. Why? His life is under threat. Saul is closing in. There doesn't seem to be any options before him. And he fled before Saul, and he went to Achish, the king of Gath. So out of fear, he's on the run. But his fear is going to cause him to do something crazy. So what he does is he runs to the king of Achish, who is the king of Gath. Now, to save you some Google time, let me tell you what the king of Gath was. That was the hometown of Goliath. How many of you remember a story about David and Goliath? Do you remember that story didn't end well for Goliath? Do you remember there's that scene where this 17-year-old boy throws a rock, hits Goliath, and all of a sudden Goliath falls over and everyone starts cheering. And then what does David do? He runs out there and he grabs the sword of Goliath because he didn't have one, and he cuts off his head and he holds it up and all of Israel begins to cheer. And then David then goes because he had 5 stones. And the reason he had 5 stones was because Goliath had 4 brothers. So he starts going after the rest of the family. So David gets afraid and he goes to Goliath's hometown. How do you think that really made the people in Goliath's town feel when they saw David? I mean, they're just sitting there thinking, this is the guy. This is the guy that took down our champion. This is the guy. So he's not being welcomed here. And so fear will cause you to think things you shouldn't think. Whatever got in his mind to think that Goliath's hometown would be a good place to hide out? I mean, where do you get a thought? Well, you get a thought like that when you're afraid. Now, let me just say that everyone in this room, we can have that degree of dumb thought. All we have to do is let fear push us. And fear will push us into levels of dumb that are profound. You can be profoundly dumb. David is now profoundly dumb because he is afraid. Fear has pushed him to do something because he thought something he shouldn't thought, and then he did something he shouldn't do, which is go to Goliath's hometown. So he gets there. And all this is because he's afraid. And see, every day, there's people around us that fear is prompting them to think things they shouldn't think and to do things they shouldn't do. Because fear can scare you. And fear scares you into doing things. Now, it was not only that, but when David left for his life, he went to the priest of Israel, and when he went, he said, I'm in the temple. He said, what weapons do you have? And the priest looked at him and said, well, this is a temple, not an armory. We don't have any weapons. He said, you don't have anything? They said, we have one thing. We have Goliath's sword that you used to cut off Goliath's head. So David said, I'll take it. So David not only is showing up at Goliath's hometown, but he's showing up with the sword that Goliath used to use, and he's showing up with that. There's nothing about this that speaks of profound thought. There's nothing about it that speaks of brilliance. But see, people find themselves afraid and they do things. They get into relationships they shouldn't get into. They make quick decisions that they shouldn't make. And then all of a sudden they find themselves, as they begin to do things, getting themselves in more and more trouble. And like I said at the beginning, the mess we can get ourselves in is bigger than the mess that life can get us in. I think the devil is surprised by this level of dumb. The devil is probably sitting there watching David go to Gath, and then he's watching him carry the sword, and the devil's turning to the demon and saying, can you believe this guy's doing that? I mean, I think the devil is profoundly caught off guard by the level. He said, we couldn't even thought of something like this. But when David gets there, he sees Achish, the king of Gath, and so he realizes in a split second, this isn't the smartest thing I've ever done. But now he's got to figure a way out. So what he does is he pretends to be mad. He pretends to be crazy. And so he starts spitting and slobbering, and he starts slurring his words and talking. And the reason he did that, in that day, they felt that if you killed somebody who was insane, then their insanity came on you. So Achish, the king, is going to look at them and say, why have you brought this crazy man to me? Why have you brought him to me in my house? Because this just isn't right. What am I supposed to do? If I kill him, it comes on me. I'm not going to let him be a house guest here. You know, he's slobbering everything and messing up. He says, I'm not going to let him do that. He said, just get rid of him. See, fear will scare you. And when fear scares you, it'll make you think things you shouldn't think and do things you shouldn't do. Fear will drive you crazy. And see, that's exactly what's happening. Now, it's at this point that David begins to recall some of the things he did to reestablish his equilibrium so that he is able to get back on firm footing. And that's what Psalm 34 is. The background is in 1 Samuel 22, but the things he did is in Psalm 34. And so when David says, I sought the Lord and he heard me and he delivered me from all my fears, what was his fear? His fear was, I've gotten myself into a mess I'm not going to get out of. I've not only gotten myself into a mess I'm not going to get out of, I'm going to die here this day. I'm going to end up being literally killed by the very sword of the man that I killed. That's what's going to happen. And so when David says, I sought the Lord and he heard me and he delivered me from all my fears, this wasn't just a moment of passing and saying, hey, I'm afraid. This was a real moment because his mind had taken him someplace that he shouldn't go and caused him to do something he shouldn't do. And what I'm saying to you is that when we read things, we need to make sure we don't replicate them. Fear will make you do dumb. Fear will put you in the wrong place. Fear will put you around the wrong people. Listen to me. Fear will put you in the wrong place. And fear will put you around the wrong people. And that's why the Bible's so profound about fear. That it keeps saying, fear not, fear not, fear not, is because of what fear will do. It affects how you think, it affects how you act. It takes you to places you shouldn't go, puts you with people that you shouldn't be. So let's just think this through. Do you know the number one reason that a lot of people join a gang is because they live in a neighborhood where they're always being threatened by death, and their only security is to join a gang that does what? Kills people. It's the evolution of a fearful thought evolving itself into an action that shouldn't be taken, but it all starts because they don't know how to get out of what they're in. So many bad business deals started out of fear. Well, if we don't do this deal, we're not going to make it. We know that this deal isn't a good deal, and we know it's not the right deal, but if we don't do this deal, we're not going to make it. Fear prompted them. So many relationships, well, I'm afraid that I'm going to be alone, so you get in a relationship with someone you shouldn't get in, and you find yourself being trapped there, thinking that being alone is better than being trapped with the wrong person. See, that's what fear does. But see, if you go back to Psalm 34 in verse 1, David gives you the first thing that you need to do. It was his antidote for fear. He says, I will bless the Lord at all times. Now, here's what I need you to see. He says, I will bless the Lord at all times. I need you to write this principle down. Bless God even when it doesn't look like he's blessing you. That's the first principle. Learn to bless God even when it doesn't look like he's blessing you. See, we'll get up here and we'll do worship and we'll say, how many of you are blessed of God? You got something to worship for. How many of you, has God does something good? But David was blessing God when it looked like God wasn't blessing him. It didn't look like God was blessing him. Or why would he be running from his life? Why would he be hiding out in caves? Why would he be isolated and caught in a circumstance? Why would he have to be making decisions and conclusions based on things? And he says, so I will bless the Lord at all times. I will bless God even when it doesn't look like he's blessing me. And I really need that to sink into you, because there are times in your life when you just think the God thing has grown absent for you and the positive things are no longer working for you. But David knew this. You handle fear by blessing God during those times when it doesn't look like he's blessing you. And that is a level of dimension, of management, of emotion that most Christians don't, because we're all willing to bless God. Oh man, God bless me. I'm just so thankful for him. I'm so thankful for him. Well, my life is going good. I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful. That's not where David is. David's running from his life. He let fear cause him to think something he shouldn't think, and now he's doing something he shouldn't do. His fear scared him, and his fear is driving him crazy, so he plays the part and he acts crazy, but now he's telling us how he got out of it, because the whole time he's acting crazy, on the inside of him, he's blessing God. He's just saying, God, I'm blessing you right now. They can't hear it, but I'm blessing you right now. And see, that environment of faith is what delivers you from all your fears. Your ability to bless God when it doesn't look like he's blessing you. I'm afraid I won't get a good job. Bless God. Well, I'm just afraid that things aren't going to work out. Bless God. Well, things look like they're getting worse. Bless God. It doesn't seem like there'll be a tomorrow. Well, just go ahead and bless God. Bless God at all times. And everyone gets the bless God. They just forget at all times. Bless God at the times it looks like God's not blessing you. There was nothing about David's life that said he was going to be king, except that God said he was going to be king. There was nothing. There was nothing. He had absolutely nothing. But see, you begin to understand the significance of this. Fear will scare you. And really, sometimes when you're a minister, you're thinking, what is the take-home point? What are you wanting people to do next? What is the outcome? What are the results you're wanting to achieve? And because fear can make us think things we shouldn't think, but we'll get used to thinking those things, so we'll think they're normal. So what I'd like you to take home is, where is fear pushing you to do something crazy? Where's fear pushing you? Where's fear? Our society went through such extensive behavior modification over COVID. And a part of it is that it was a fear that was universal and individual at the same time. It was a fear that was bought into by every segment of society. It was a fear that was bought into by every regimented thought in society. Everything we're being told is similar to David. I mean, I can remember as a kid during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I can remember that we would practice every day ducking cover, getting under our desk. They taught us how to get under our desk, how to put our hands over our head. Now let me ask you, if you're in the middle of a nuclear blast, what does getting under your desk do for you? It was my first experience with the government that the government will always give you something to do that makes no sense. It just makes no sense. But see, that's what fear does. It creates nonsense, so things don't make sense. So the first antidote of fear is being able to bless God when it doesn't look like He's going to bless you.